And
the
and
coastal neighborhood.
and I'm guessing because they were close to the water, they must have been impacted during the war, right? Big time.
Yeah, and what during the war, it's interesting because the government actually acquisitioned many of the fishing boats to patrol the South Pacific. So a lot of the fishermen saw their boats taken, saying, "Hey, we need your boats to go patrol." They eventually did get them back, but that also did put a sort of a halt to the fishing for that time period during the war. And even during the war on the streets, there was a warden, air raid warden. There was, we talked actually about a lot of the Japanese American internment, the camps. And the same thing happened to the Italians, not in great numbers like the Japanese, but it happened to them as well. In San Diego, a government official would come, and there are many stories of people knocking on, residents' doors saying, "We need to check your papers," basically. And the irony, of course, is you had a lot of the soldiers, the Italian American boys, were fighting, overseas. The women were involved in the war effort, the men were involved in the war effort, of course, and they're getting knocks on their door saying, you guys are enemy aliens. So, um, what's going on there? That was the time. So that's a little known story that needs to be told as well. So many stories. The Italians, Americans had curfews in the neighborhood. Some officials confiscated shortwave radios. So many stories of that during the wartime. Yeah.
Yeah, I have uh, my mom's parents. I have their alien registration cards,
Do
or at
you?
least photo of it. You
Yeah.
know, so it has their picture, and they were,
Yeah.
they were guessing the late 50s, early
Sure.
60s.
Right.
uh, and but I didn't know that they actually confiscated the boats. That's something.
Yep.
Uh,
Took the boats for quite some time, and yeah, they sent them down and make sure everything's cool down there, as it were. Many of the boats, because at that point, the fishing started with little bait boats. They were small, of course, bamboo pole fishing. But then a lot of the Italian innovations, they started going to what was called super seiners. They had big nets with rigs and automatic, machinery. These boats were huge, so they could travel farther. So, that was eventually in the 60s and 70s. But as the boats progressed, there were a lot of bigger boats that the government could acquisition, and they would call them yard patrol boats, YP boats, yippies colloquially. They were known as yippies.
wow, that's
Yeah.
something.
So a
Um,
lot of stories of those as well here in San Diego.
Well, and my uncle, because he was left behind by my grandparents, after the war they stopped the immigration.
Right.
My whole family was here except for my one uncle. And at the end of the war, my grandmother had four sons in the service, and he had to wait in Canada for like 4 or
Oh,
5
wow.
years.
Sure.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
didn't matter that his
No.
brothers fought in the war.